Michelob Ultra and Mich Ultra wholesaler Better Brands Incorporated are excited to announce a new partnership with Sober Skipper, part of the Sea-Tow Foundation. While we know consumers enjoy relaxing days on the water with ultras in hand, it's important to remember to drink and boat responsibly. Choose to be or to designate a sober skipper before leaving the dock. Do it for your family and friends, your passengers, and everyone else on board. Michelob Ultra salutes all sober skippers who take the pledge. Cheers, and we'll see you on the water.
Realtree has always had a connection to the fishing industry and the outdoor lifestyle. In 2016, Realtree expanded on the traditional business of creating the world's most effective camouflage patterns to create a fishing brand and family of patterns designed to connect the woods to the water and strengthen the bond between the two worlds. We couldn't be more excited to be working with the industry's top brands, retailers, and anglers to continue our growth, and we hope that you will join us. Enjoy Realtree fishing patterns inshore, offshore, on the lake, or at the dock. Learn more about the extensive line Realtree fishing patterns, apparel, gear, and more at Realtree.com.
One thing that all of us outdoorsmen and women love to do is travel, whether to fish new waters or to chase wild game in other areas that we may not get opportunities at in our own area. Our friends at Monster Reservations Group want to open up an entirely new chance for you to travel and enjoy the outdoors or just relaxing. With over 40 destinations in the U.S. like beautiful Gatlinburg, Tennessee, Wisconsin Dells and Shenandoah Valley, Virginia, Poconos, Pennsylvania, and even our backyard here at Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And many more. They are going to give you twice the vacation. That's right. Pay for 4 nights, and you're going to get 4 nights for free. That's $498 for an 8-night stay at one of our incredible destinations, and that's for simply listening to Trilogy Outdoors. Go book your trip and get all the details at www.monsterrg.com. That's monsterrg, all lowercase.com. Pay less for an incredible opportunity to explore the outdoors in your choice of over 40 destinations. Book your trip now.
Trilogy Outdoors.
All right, folks, welcome to this week's edition of Trilogy Outdoors podcast. And I tell you, my wonderful partner, Stephen Goldfinch, has done an incredible job at lining up our guest this week. And I'm going to say that little alarm right there probably would happen at most places where our guest showed up. Now, there would also be those of us that would run up and probably just give him a big old hug and have been Ted Nugent fans forever.
Well, Ted's certainly controversial. There's no way to get around that. But no doubt about it, he is an interesting guy, and we need to have a conversation with him. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think it is going to be great. I mean, are you up to tune on all of his music, or are you more in tune to him with Spirit of the Wild?
Well, I know his 80s and 90s music. I don't know if I have heard a recent album by him. Does he have a recent album?
Oh, yeah. Let's talk to him about it. Let's talk to him about Come Take It.
Come Take It. All right. I'm looking.
Yeah, we definitely need to bring that up. But I tell you what, I think this is probably going to be one of our most interesting episodes by far.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
I do, and I thought about going on the Book of Faces there earlier and asking, if you got to interview Ted Nugent, what are some questions you would ask? But I felt like that would really be opening a door up for a ton of things.
Well, believe it or not, Inglis, I have a number of questions from folks.
Do you really?
I do.
Wonderful.
I do. I sent out a universe-wide, Goldfinch universe-wide question of the day, and I got a number of questions, and so we're going to ask a couple of those. What's on people's minds?
Well, there you go. I tell you what, folks, without any more delay, I tell you what, it's a great time. Let's go ahead and introduce you to our guest this week.
Is this Ted Nugent? It is. Ted, can you hear me?
Well, let her rip, Stephen.
There we go.
I got you. Thanks so much for joining us on the Trilogy Outdoor podcast. Appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure. Trilogy Outdoors. I have a funny feeling that you deserve me and I deserve you, because we're going to talk about truth, logic, common sense, and all those wonderful God-given individual rights. Am I correct?
You're dead on.
Amen, brother.
You're dead on. We were talking about this earlier today and how excited we were. And, my partner here, Captain Inglis, said, we're going to make some people mad because there are 3 gun-loving conservatives And I said,
gentlemen, I got to tell you, I know why you love me. It's the same reason I love me, is because I've never compromised, I've never backed down, and I keep and I bear. And I have a vapor trail of very hurt-feeling idiots behind me everywhere I go for the last 60 years. So, yeah, celebrate that truth, logic, and common sense, and God bless you for doing so, man.
That's awesome. I'm in politics. You may not know that, but I'm in politics, and I always tell people honesty is better than harmony. Honesty is better than harmony, and I think that's a universal, immovable truth.
Well, I'm into politics too. I dare to experiment in self-government. I know I'm a we the people who the U.S. government is supposed to work for, and right now they're in violation of their sacred oath to the Constitution. So I trample the weak and hurdle the dead on an hourly basis. And believe me, when I speak, gentlemen, it's not a Ted Nugent thing. It's a we the people thing from the not-so-mean streets of America who understand the treachery, the treason, the oath violating, the criminal, outrageous, demonic abuse of power by Uncle Sam. What a sad day in America when a free American has to say the truth that is so heartbreaking, that Uncle Sam is the enemy of America. And what Joe Biden and what Eric Holder and Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, why those people aren't in jail right now facing charges of treason is one of the great mysteries of the world. But I got to tell you, we can celebrate truth, logic, and common sense and good over evil. But the real curse is the self-inflicted embarrassment of apathy that let it get this bad.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, every election is an opportunity for change. And, we're a people governed by consent, at least we should be. And we have to have public servants that believe in that policy. And if we don't have public servants that believe in that policy, we end up with folks like you, quite frankly.
Yep.
Let's just be as blunt as we can be here. When the people are no longer governed by consent, you have the people that rise up and try to make a difference and try to change things. And that's a good thing. That's the way that the founders intended it to be. And you're certainly one of those voices.
Unfortunately, it's a worst time right now. I don't know how old you guys are, but I'm 73. So I was born in the glow of good over evil, where the American GI, driven by the goal to get home to freedom, the only real freedom in the history of mankind, that we crushed the evil Japs and Nazis, who were pure evil, just absolutely demonic, satanic, nasty, rotten, soulless, anti-human monsters. We came home after defeating that pure evil. And when I was born in Detroit in 1948, there was still that celebration of clear and present, unambiguous good over evil. And the work ethic that Detroit produced, instead of making cars and trucks, we started making howitzers and B-29s. And
right.
That spirit of sacrifice and risk-taking to defeat evil was still the driving force in my upbringing. Now, of course, Detroit, very embarrassingly and heartbreakingly, has turned into a suburb of San Francisco, politically speaking. But that fervor that I'm expressing to you guys and that you guys celebrate, and I'm sure you fight for it, you push for it, that is still alive and well across this country. I don't care if it's at the feed mill or the barbecue or the gun range or the deer camp or the Whole Foods or the sushi bar, or even when I stop by some custom coffee shop, where you wouldn't think it would be a Ted Nugent demographic, but it is, because people who get up early and go to work, that is a Ted Nugent demographic, because that describes my family, that describes you guys and your family. So there really is a lot of heartbreak that has manifested itself now in a great, great middle finger on fire. Of all places, Canada. I mean, Canadians are much too polite, much too obedient, much too subservient, but boy, have they had enough. And that wonderful, wonderful truckers' protest, which represents a huge swath of God, family, country, individual freedoms that is so rare up in Canada. Boy, is that resonating at a time to celebrate, huh?
It is, and now unfortunately it looks like they've shut the last of them down, but they certainly made a point. And what's interesting to me, if you don't mind talking a little bit about your history, you brought up a great point. I mean, you were born as a baby boomer in '48 and raised coming of age in the age of hippies and socialism and bordering on communism. Certainly protests of the Vietnam War, which inspired a lot of that stuff. And a lot of people born of your age fell into that trap and became, what I would call anti-capitalists and maybe even anti-American in some way. And how did you avoid that? What was it that brought you to the path that you're on here today instead of the path that, so many others have taken that are your age?
Well, there's quite a vast, unlimited, really, cocktail of human spirit and emotions. I could try to summarize it in the simplest of terms that, number one, my dad was a drill sergeant in World War II in the U.S. Army Cavalry, and he never stopped being that drill sergeant. God bless the great man, huh?
Yeah.
So I was actually brought up with the most important thing for quality of life, and that's called discipline.
Sure.
Now,
yeah.
that also, I'll jump to the next extreme. I was ripe to be a defiant punk coming out of the world of beatniks and hippies, where drug abuse, substance abuse, and just stupidity, drooling, puking, and dying was all around me. But I was able to call upon pragmatism to defy. I've been clean and sober for 73 years. No drugs, no alcohol, no tobacco. Well, I do chew on a Cuban cigar when I shoot my machine gun. It just seems to be the right thing to do.
It does, doesn't it? It does.
But if you're going to have a brass rainbow, you should chew on a stogie. That's the way I look at it, Sergeant Rock.
Exactly.
But my point is that I think I have the most powerful and important DNA of humanity, if you can bear with me.
Sure.
But most importantly, an American, and that is the spirit of defiance. Before there was a colloquialism, critical thinking, I was a critical thinker. And when my band, again, it was pre-hippie, it was beatnik time when I was playing college sock hops and fraternity parties and sorority parties, and they were all hippies. They're actually beatniks like Dobie Krebs, Maynard G. Krebs.
Right.
With the beret and the goatee and smoking this really delicious smelling cigarette. I had no idea what it was, but they were all idiots. They were stumbling and drooling. They struggled to form a sentence, kind of like the president. It's infesting our White House right now. But I saw that the substance abuse turned my amazing musicians. I was surrounded by just astonishing Detroit musical forces, groove and tightness and adventure and the dedication, the work ethic to be the best that you can be on drums and bass and guitar and keyboards. And I saw that when they got high, that they were no longer a musical force to reckon with. They were sloppy. They forgot arrangements, because we're real adventuresome. Everybody from Yusef Lateef to James Brown and the mighty Motown Funk Brothers. So we had a priority to deliver our music powerfully, like the Black heroes, like James Brown and Wilson Pickett and Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley. So I saw with the substance abuse that my dad was so against, instead of me rebelling against my dad, I went, you know what? He's right. And these guys are drunk and stoned. They're worthless. So I avoided at that point. And another powerful force in my decision to be clean and sober and avoid stupidity was I was raised in a bow hunting family. And the martial art of the mystical flight of the arrow and the stealth necessary to get close to a Michigan whitetail with a sharp stick is so immeasurably challenging and difficult that I knew that if you got drunk or stoned, you'd have to buy chicken. And I wanted to kill a deer so bad with my bow and arrow that I could see that it was about, I couldn't have told you this when I was a little boy, but I instinctively knew that in order to get close to that deer or the squirrel or the pheasant or whatever the potential dinner was, you had to be so tuned into your cause and effect and your surroundings. And that same rule of engagement was primary in the musical collaborative effort that I was just plunged into as a young boy in Detroit. So to be the best that you can be means that you can't rely on others, which is independence instead of socialism. And to be the best that you can be, which my dad insisted on, you couldn't be drunk or stoned.
Right.
And I saw people that were supposedly rebelling, though, by the way, they were all the same rebellion. They weren't rebelling against anybody. They were a bunch of sheep.
Sure.
It was called peer pressure, and I gave it the finger. I absolutely denounced and just just outcast the concept of peer pressure. And there was no such thing if you stand up on your own 2 feet and your own spirit. So I was just lucky to be raised right, to find a utilitarian application of my dad's discipline to the bow hunting dream and to the musical dream. And here it is 73 years later. And gentlemen, the jury is not still out. I wish you could talk to some of the greatest musicians I've been able to make friends with, and you'd see a stumbling, borderline incoherent embarrassment that they can't form a sentence. They don't know what punctuality is. They have no dynamic, no life, liberty, and pursuit of passionate happiness. Drugs and alcohol destroy you and everybody around you. So I learned that as a bow hunter and as a guitar guy.
That's fascinating. You brought up bow hunting, and y'all must have been some of the first, I would imagine, one of the first families in the area to bow hunt. It really wasn't, as far as I know, didn't become very popular until the 80s, at least here in the Southeast. It didn't become very popular until the 80s. So you were, cutting edge if you were hunting deer in the 50s and 60s, and well, it would have been the 60s, I guess, for you, where you're up. Where did you deer hunt as a child? Up in the UP, or where were you deer hunting mostly?
Well, again, I was born right after they almost denuded the Midwest. I mean, they cut down every tree. I think they cut down everything except the Hartwick pines. The whole Midwest was, no taller than your ankle when the lumber orgy was over. But what that did is enhance wildlife habitat, because that fresh growth is the food and the shelter and the sanctuary for wildlife, especially the mighty white-tailed deer. So when I was born in 48, my dad was already a follower of the great Fred Bear out of Grayling, Michigan. He had just moved from Detroit, and he started his bear archery up in Grayling, Michigan. And as young as 3, 4, 5 years old, we'd stop every year at this little shack, a little kind of a yellow cinder block shack in Grayling that had a little hand-carved piece of north white pine that said Bear Archery. And of course, I was already into the bow and arrow, because our home on 23251 Florence on the corner of Hazleton was right across from the mighty Ford Motor Company Rouge River, which was a wildlife paradise habitat. So my instincts kicked in, whether it was a homemade slingshot or my homemade bow and arrow, and I was just fascinated by the stealth and the natural flexing of my perfect predator instinct. And then, since my dad was a bow hunter, that fanned the flames of that conservation lifestyle. Then, having met Fred Bear, good grief, what more could a guy want?
What an amazing guy.
What a great man.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you're right. It was the infancy of returning to the bow and arrow. At that point, the 03 and 06 30 caliber bullet doing 2,800 feet per second was now being expanded by the Roy Weatherbees of the world, and reach out there and kill them game at 300-400 yards beyond the 30-30 and the 06. But there was an inner circle of instinctual conservationists that wanted to know more about the animals we killed. I'm a big fan of long range stuff. I got a GA Precision 308 that if I can see it, I can kill it. But something fascinating, I use the term spirit of the wild, to try to get close to those animals that God created not to let you get close, is one of the most fulfilling accomplishments available to mankind. And so, having met Fred, once I realized who he was, it's like when I got to play bass guitar for Chuck Berry. I mean, it was like the bow hunting czar meeting the rock and roll czar, and it was a combination of bow hunting and guitar playing at that time. By the time I was 6 or 7, and it stuck with me. And I got to tell you, I'm sitting here on our Texas ranch, and I'm wrapping up the greatest deer season of my life with my trusty bow and arrow. And I've just recorded a new record called Detroit Muscle, some of the most fire-breathing, fun animal breeding soundtrack you'll ever dance to. So that fire, even at the age of 73, because I've been clean and sober, everything still works pretty good. And that was inspired by the lessons of nature that Fred and my dad, my Uncle Dick, my Uncle John taught me. And it was a lifestyle way back then, and boy, is it a lifestyle now, thank God. In these treacherous times, the healing powers of nature are most effective and efficient when you actually participate in the tooth, fang, and claw world of nature, and you kill your own meals, and you manage wildlife for a healthy biodiversity. So, as a guitar player, that touch, that blood and guts, literally and figuratively, under my fingernails, comes right out of guitar playing. And we all know that what Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, and Little Richard invented was a primal soundtrack, a primal spirit, a primal scream. And there's no other guitar player in the world that creates songs with fresh deer blood under his fingernails. So I've got a lock on the primal scream of real rock and roll.
And is that your primary quarry today? You told us you were on your Texas ranch. Is that what you would consider to be your favorite type of hunting still today? Is deer hunting with bow?
I do a lot of interviews with the non-hunting world, entertainment world, and they ask me what my favorite game animal is. My standard response is whatever you got 20 yards looking the other way, broadside. That's my favorite animal.
Right.
Because with a bow and arrow, it's so challenging. I was out hog hunting last night. I didn't get one. They kind of circled me, but I love small game. I got 3 dogs that are just murder on pheasants and doves and quail and woodcock and grouse and chuckers and doves and squirrels and rabbits. And I got a recipe for groundhog that you guys would just die for.
Really?
The groundhog does. And so I do it all. I get to hunt all year. My tour lasts probably 6 to 8 weeks each summer, if the communist Chinese in the White House would get out of my way this year. So I have a great balanced life between outrageous fire-breathing rock and roll and the most spiritually fortifying time in a tree of any man that has ever lived. I climb a tree 300 days a year. I live for those healing moments outside the culture war battle that I engage in every day. And it keeps you bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I promise you that.
Yeah, you said something that sort of dovetails with what we were having a radio show. Yesterday, English, or day before yesterday? We had a radio show here in the Myrtle Beach area, the greater Myrtle Beach area. Murrells Inlet's where our radio show is, and I said something that I had 4 or 5 calls on afterwards, and I said, I think that hunting, just being outside in general, but especially hunting, is sort of like a vitamin that the human body needs, and it's been missing, especially for kids nowadays. This new generation of kids that spend most of their time in front of screens, they're missing this vitamin. I can tell, if I'm sick or I'm in front of a computer screen for any period of time, I can tell when I haven't gotten that outside, outdoors vitamin. It's like something is missing from your body. It's in your DNA. And if you deny it, it's to your own detriment. And you have thoroughly fleshed that out for us in a way that's so articulate.
Well, I started the Ted Nugent Camp for Kids nonprofit volunteer charity in 1989 after the great Fred Bear passed away, because I hunted with him every year. And he kept reminding me that he loved the way that I promoted the sport. I shoot bows and arrows. I shoot flaming arrows on stage. And what could be a more enhancing, enthralling promotional tool than a rock and roll maniac shooting flaming arrows on stage? So he
awesome.
said he loved the way I promote the sport. And I always talk about conservation. I always talk about being clean and sober. And he told me every year to keep doing it like I'm doing it. So when he passed in March of '88, I created the Ted Nugent Camp for Kids charity. And you're right. Most of my volunteers are cops and teachers and ranchers and farmers and, just great families who see special needs kids who haven't had access or haven't been educated to the essentiality of the healing powers of nature, the outdoor recreation that recreates your spirit. They don't even teach that in school. In fact, they teach just the opposite if they teach anything. And so the Camp for Kids has literally graduated thousands, I think tens of thousands of kids in Iowa, Nebraska, Colorado, South Dakota, and Michigan. And these kids now I have parents that are bringing their children to the Ted Nugent Camp for Kids that were originally the kids that came to my camp, and now they're bringing their children.
That's
so
awesome.
Yes, we teach them archery, we teach them self-discipline, we teach them how to trap, how to fish, how to survive in the outdoors, how to be an asset to your family, your community, your great nation, the wildlife, the Mother Earth, and how to always put more back in than you take out. We've planted tens of thousands of trees with these kids, and it turns them on. That you can see their eyes get bigger and brighter, and they can't wait to shoot that next arrow, or to go to the rifle range and aim small, miss small. The trigger control, the safety factor, the sight acquisition, the breathing. I'm telling you, kids from 7 to 17, you should see the emotional correspondence I get, guys. That their parents hug me and cry that I saved their sons and daughters' lives, and it's because that outdoor power, that spirit of nature, that God's miraculous, renewable, life-giving creation literally kept me out of the stupidity of the drugs and the alcohol and the nonsense. They're thinking that Che Guevara was a good guy. I have some rock and roll friends that wear Che Guevara shirts, and I go, I hope you know that guy would have killed you. Yeah. I hope you know that you're celebrating some genocidal devil that would have killed you and your family. What do you have a Charles Manson shirt you can wear? What kind of drugs are you on, you dirtbag?
Right.
So yeah, the Ted Nugent Camp for Kids has created an army, and it's very contagious. Our battle cry is go forth. Invite your friends at school and church. Invite your neighbors that don't know archery, that don't know marksmanship. Get them in a supervised, safe environment and teach them that they are in charge of their life/arrow.
That's fantastic.
You are autonomous. You have a declaration of independence, that God gave you everything you need. Know it, hone it, revere it, and put it to work. Gentlemen, if people go to tednugent.com, I think there's a heading, Ted Nugent Camp for Kids, and I'm telling you, it's all volunteer. Nobody gets compensated for gas or anything. The industry supplies bows and arrows and slingshots and marbles and pellet rifles and fishing poles and fishing tackle. It literally is. And here's the phenomena. When was the last time you read about this unbelievable children's camp about gun safety and hunter safety and being clean and sober? When was the last time you read the story about the Ted Nugent Camp for Kids in Outdoor Life magazine?
It's not going to get published. It's not going to get put out there.
But this is an industry that claims they need to promote the outdoor sports.
Right.
And I've been doing it for 33 years. Now, this isn't bad, sour grapes, but I'm angry because it's diminishing what the Camp for Kids could be doing on a larger scale. And who's in the way? The hunting industry is in the way.
It doesn't even seem like it's that controversial. I mean,
at all.
We're not talking about
controversial things to teach a kid to fish.
Right. Right. I mean, you and I want to talk about something controversial with you, but I mean, to your point, these are just getting kids off of the screens and outside and giving them exercise and sunlight and you know, workable knowledge about the outdoors. There's nothing controversial about that at all. At least there shouldn't be.
In fact, it's life-saving. But that's the point. Here we are in the insanity of 2022, where this horrible, horrible human being thinks he's the commander-in-chief. And that is a manifestation of a cultural deprivation, the likes of which I don't think has ever happened to this degree, because America is supposed to be free. It's supposed to be self-evident truth, constitutional Bill of Rights based. And this guy's in the White House, and I'll tell you why. Because the perfect things in life, gun safety, archery, hunting, fishing, trapping, environmentalism, conservation, those perfect things, self-defense, the perfect things are controversial. This is insanity.
Yeah. Well, look, we talked about something that wasn't so controversial, even though some people believe it is. Let's talk about something controversial. Jim Shockey and I, who's a great friend, were having this conversation the other day, and he had fantastic perspective on it. I want to hear your perspective on this. So, killing your own meat. I mean, obviously not something that was controversial 100 years ago or 200 years ago. It was the only option. But today, the same people that are standing in line at McDonald's are the people that are criticizing us. They're waiting on their hamburger. They're wearing their leather belt and their leather shoes. They're sitting in a leather seat. And they criticize us for killing our own meat and taking it home, butchering it, and eating it. How hypocritical, how illogical is that?
Well, once again, I use the term the manifestation of cultural deprivation. Let me give you a positive note on this. and I think Jim knows this, but he might have not delivered it to you. You're identifying people who are confused or turned off or angry that we kill our own food. That is such a lunatic fringe. These are the same people that think biological men should be able to destroy all the women's athletic world records. These are the same freaks that think open borders will make it a better quality of life. This is the same lunatic fringe that is represented by the Democrat Party, CNN, big tech, Hollywood, and academia that thinks that releasing murderers and rapists and carjackers and child molesters will be good for your neighborhood. So don't ever think for a minute that they represent the majority of humanity. They don't. The most perfect example is I've been around a long time. People recognize me. I could go to a place like Whole Foods where everybody's got pierced body parts and some purple hair, and you know what? They love me. They want to know all about venison, and I've had guys from behind the fish counter go, "Hey, Uncle Ted, my grandma wants a pistol. What kind should she get, man? She should get a revolver or an automatic." My point is that even in a Starbucks in Mill Valley, California, the epicenter of dirtbags, the epicenter of hypocrisy, the epicenter of demonicy and child molestation and child trafficking, even at the Starbucks, the gal behind the counter wants to talk to me about wild pork. So the reason that it's a consideration that there are maniacs that will literally be responsible for the death of billions of creatures when they eat a salad, and I'm sure you know why.
Oh, yeah.
Because in order to protect a bean field, first of all, you have to have a disc and a plow that will kill everything
in the ground
in that field to prep it for the bean plantings.
Right.
And then they will cultivate it, and they will go through, if anything dares to survive the tractor and the plow and the disc, then they'll call upon the chemical warfare of Monsanto and poison to death in a lingering, suffering horror every living thing that gets in the way of your tofu salad.
Right.
Now, I talked like that on Joe Rogan. We set a world record 3.5 hours of truth, logic, and common sense.
That's awesome.
And people would call Joe Rogan. He said it was unprecedented, the feedback he got, because when I articulated that if you wanted to kill the most living things possible, you would have to have a vegan diet. Because the farmers and the ranchers and even the organic farmers who grow your beans, they kill everything.
And by the way, I don't have any problem with that. I mean, I like salad. I like salad too.
I love it. But one of my favorite things is when I'm planting my food plots with a plow and a disc, and I see the crows and the seagulls following me.
Right.
I'm able to shoot the crows from my tractor.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I have no problem. I don't.
They're following me because I have dismembered everything.
Right.
Every snake, every gopher, every shrew, every vole, every ground squirrel, every bird, every turtle, every frog has been dismembered by my preparing the ground for beans.
Right. Right.
But I'm a big fan. From death comes life. But again, be careful you give any consideration or credence to those who have a problem with venison. Yeah. That is an absolute mindless, soulless, disconnected lunatic fringe. And unfortunately, we have politicians that are also mindless and soulless and disconnected, and they actually create conservation policies and regulations based on the input of somebody who thinks that you should ban venison.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of our Department of Natural Resources are following those same people. We believe it or not,
they work for us.
Yeah, I mean, believe it or not, I've had this same conversation. My committee in the Senate is Fish and Game, and we have this discussion with the Department of Natural Resources all the time. And I hear the same diatribe from them. We're gonna catch a lot of strife from the anti-hunters because of that. We were talking about bear hunting earlier last year, and the question on the agenda was to allow baiting for bear or not. And in South Carolina, you can imagine lots of trees. It's not like the same way you hunt bears in Colorado where you see them from a mile away. You don't see these bears coming. We have very thick forest, and so really baiting or hounds are the only way to kill a bear in South Carolina. So we had this debate. The Department of Natural Resources explanation for why they didn't support it is because the anti-hunters would just be all over us. And I said, guys, why are we making policy based on the people that hate us? What's the point of this?
Yeah,
what logic? Right. What logic is there behind this? And it's just that when I say we, I guess I should say they don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. That's not the way we make policy. It should never be the way we make policy.
When it comes to considering hurting people's feelings, I think you should use the Uncle Ted battle cry, and it goes like this: "You Pearl Harbor me, I Nagasaki you."
Sure.
Now, did we hurt somebody's feelings when we blew up Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
I'm sure.
Well, I'm afraid we did, but guess what? It was perfect.
Right.
If you Pearl Harbor me, I Nagasaki you. When Old Yeller brings you your slippers and saves the child from the snake, you give him a biscuit. Mm-hmm. When Old Yeller starts to foam at the mouth, you put a bullet between his eyes. Right. Same dog, different conditions. And feelings be damned. So that's the point. And you cannot manage bears in the asset column without using hounds and bait.
Right.
Ask California, ask Colorado, ask anybody who has bears. Ron DeSantis, a great governor, he is absolutely blowing it. While 1,000 cubs are being smashed by Mercedes-Benz in downtown Naples because for some insane reason, this otherwise great governor will listen to an animal rights freak and not open a bear season in Florida where they are dangerously overpopulated. So that's that's on the top of my list to get things right. Is Ron DeSantis, come on, you're a great governor, but wake up. You have too many bears. They're in the liability column because they're not worth anything, and you're slaughtering them and compensating cattle and sheep and livestock owners because the bears are a liability. You could turn them into an asset overnight. It really is unbelievable, and that's that pressure you're talking about. But if we, the sporting community, if we don't get to the polls and vote and call our senator and our mayor and our congressman and our governor and call everybody and let them know the truth about wildlife management, you cannot adequately manage bear numbers without the use of hounds and bait. Case closed.
What is it about bears that inspires so much? I mean, people that don't like hunting clearly don't like any hunting, but a deer or a wild pig, it doesn't inspire nearly as much hatred and passion as a bear. I mean, a bear, you've seen all these stories, this one bear wanders 1,000 miles and all of a sudden they name him, and the minute that they name him, it's over, right? I mean, it's over. The bear has a personality, and you see him places, and everybody's Facebooking him, and he's off limits now. If you killed that bear, your life is over. They are going to ruin it. Just like the girl that shot the lion that was collared in Africa, completely legal shot. The dentist, same thing. The dentist that shot the lion, completely legal kill, but they tried to ruin his life because it had a name. It had a name.
Well, how soulless can you be to reduce a living, breathing wild animal to the level of a cartoon?
Yeah.
And that's what they do. So here's my recommendation. Believe me, gentlemen, I've been doing this for over 50 years in the world of dirty, goofball, stoner, rock and roll hippies. When the idiots attack you for doing the right thing, quadruple down on it. And you tell them, I'm happy I killed the bear. I ate the bear. I bought licenses and permits and fees. I generated massive revenues into the economy while reducing the damage and the danger from the bear. And I didn't have to compensate the sheep farmers, the alpaca farmers, or the cattle farmers, or the horse farmers, the bears that kill and destroy their livestock. The bear, because I hunted it, was in the asset column. Shame on you for not admitting that. These people are liars. They hate nature. They hate wildlife because the minute you compromise sustained yield, habitat carrying capacity, wildlife regulations, that wildlife species immediately ends up in the liability column instead of the asset column. If you want to slaughter every elephant on the earth, then ban elephant hunting, because when there's no elephant hunters paying for anti-poaching squads and radio telemetry and jeeps and the protection of that resource, then the poachers come in and indiscriminately slaughter all of them. And you need to rub that in the face of the people who are living a lie, because they're dangerous, they're anti-nature, they're anti-wildlife, and if you bring them great suffering and anguish, you have done a good thing.
Yeah. Botswana's got 3 times the carrying capacity of elephants.
That's right.
You know, and I mean, they've made so many mistakes with the elephant populations, and they've, you know, they're making them with lions as well, but they've made so many mistakes in Africa. You and I both have hunted in Africa numerous times. I've seen some of your shows, and I know how you feel about that. But Africa is truly a unique situation in that it is all money driven. If you do not put a value on an animal, it's dead in Africa. It's 100% dead immediately. They will poison it. They'll shoot it. They'll cut its tusks off. They'll sell it to the Chinese, which is where most of these poaching operations originate from. It is a liability to the 10th degree or to the nth degree if you don't put a value on it, and people don't understand that. Hunters are the only people saving wildlife in Africa.
Well, God bless you for that. It's truth, logic, and common sense. And the thing is, we need to hammer it home all the time. You reference our good friend Jim Shockey. He does a great job.
Oh, yeah.
But what we see on the Outdoor Channel, the Sportsman's Channel, the Pursuit Network, and more on Discovery and the A&E and the History Channel, more and more honesty about the reality of tooth, fang, and claw nature is now starting to educate people who are living a lie and living a zoo life and living a cartoon life. So again, those that would go against sound and proven science-based wildlife management, they really are a lunatic fringe. But quite honestly, so is CNN. So is the Democrat Party. I mean, try to find somebody, stop anybody anywhere. You won't find a Biden hat or a Biden sign in anybody's yard, so it's kind of hard to find a Biden supporter. But if you can find a Biden supporter, go ask them. Let's start with a list of the good things Joe has done. Number 1 would be what? No, I need number 1. The number 1 good thing Joe has done would be what?
Can't do it.
Crickets.
I can't do it.
So don't remember. So God bless you for educating and celebrating the real reverence for nature that is tooth, fang, and claw, that is sustained yield, that is the absolute moral responsibility to harvest the surplus every year to make room for the next year's production, because the next year's production is coming, but the expansion of habitat is not coming.
Right.
So the land can support X, and if we don't harvest the surplus based on God's miracle of renewability during the natural organic hunting season, then there'll be no place for the fawns or the calves or the cubs to live. And then they become a liability. So again, I've been doing interviews in rock and roll radio and rock and roll forever. And even those that are inclined and when the interview first starts, you can tell that they're adamant. They want to hate me because I killed Bambi.
Sure. Yeah.
But after about 2 or 3 minutes, I got them tilting their head, furrowing their brow, squinting their eyes, and going, "Oh, habitat carrying capacity? I was not aware of that. Oh, population dynamics. Oh, they have no. Oh, I see. They have twins and triplets in prime habit. Oh, license fees and sporting goods and food, lodging, travel, restaurants, groceries, taxidermists, ice, beer. Oh, I see. So that deer can either cost me tax dollars or it can generate enormous revenues. I did not know that.
Amazing.
Once they know that, it's really only some LSD reservoir freak that will still deny it.
Yeah.
So you're doing God's work, and I'm so proud to share this, shall we say, the spirit of the wild campfire with Uncle Ted, because you guys got it, man. Good for you. Thank you for that.
Well, I really appreciate you. Can we talk about rock and roll for just a minute before we let you go?
I want to break.
Try to stop me.
Hey, Ted, I'm busting in. This is Captain D in here, and I'm enjoying this so much. But I do have to share something with you real quick. So my children and I, they're 8 and 4. We're watching Spirit of the Wild 2 nights ago on the Outdoor Channel, and you harvested a crow with the bow.
Was that great or what?
Hey, that was awesome. But now Steven was at my house last night for the Super Bowl, And I don't even know if he picked up. My son will not put his bow down now. He's got a toy bow, but he is walking around the house with that bow and in the yard shooting that bow ever since we watched you shoot that crow out with that bow. But I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of Spirit of the Wild. I've been watching it. I love the fact that you're real on there. Leave all the political stuff out. Like, I could even do that. But I'm going to say your show is so much better than everybody else because you know what? When you're hungry, you harvest that cow horn. You harvest that spike. It's going to the table. It's not about your those antlers that go on the wall. It's just so much more to it than that.
Well, Captain, that means so much to me. You give your son a big hug and a smooch from Uncle Ted because it is very contagious, and they can tell that I don't have any baggage. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I'm just showing how the real world works. We don't produce Ted Nugent Spirit of the Wild. We just push the record button. You can tell. All these other guys, they got some really elaborate productions, and God bless them. It's really impressive. But we don't have any elaborate production. We just push the record button, and you're going to get what I do on film, and there's no editing it out. But what your son represented, if you guys, in fact, you should go to my Facebook and see the communication I get nonstop, 24/7, 365. There are so many young people that watch Spirit of the Wild because it's so raw and so honest, and I'm not afraid to have fun, and I'm not afraid to be silly. I act on Spirit of the Wild the same way I act at the Thanksgiving dinner table or around the coffee table with a bunch of buddies of mine. I don't have to impress anybody, but down to earth, grounded honesty, that does impress young people, especially when it's wrapped in the message of being clean and sober. Yeah. If you could witness the armies of young people that have communicated those same statements that your son represented, I go to bed at night with a really broad grin on my face. I didn't set out to do this, but just by being honest and just whacking and stacking and aim small, miss small, and shooting a damn crow, it really is contagious. And the mystical flight of the arrow really is a martial art, and it's so instinctual. And you see that in your son, and we see it in all the kids at our Ted Nugent Camp for Kids. And everywhere I go, people have their young little boys and girls come up, and they say things like, "Where have I seen this before, Uncle Ted?" When I find a bloody arrow. So yes, it is contagious. So that is what keeps me going. Thanks for sharing that with me, Captain.
You're welcome, Ted. I tell you what, we love the show, but I know Steven's got some music questions here, and of course, we all know that we all know how important that is to you.
I just want to, I know you've got a new album out, and I was actually listening to Come and Take It a little while ago, and I just found that to be a really powerful song, at least for me, and I wanted you to talk about it a little bit. I mean, the imagery on the music video is powerful, but the words and how did you come up with that?
Well, again, when you're clean and sober your whole life, the brain works pretty good. Yeah. and so truth, logic, and common sense dominate your life. And when you see people going against truth, Democrats and rhinos, when you see people going against logic, Uncle Sam, big tech, media, academia, when you see people going against common sense and attempting to infringe and succeeding to infringe California, Illinois, Maryland, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, there is no Second Amendment in half the country. Yeah. Well, since when do you need a permit for any of your amendments? You don't need a permit for your First Amendment. I don't need paperwork, and there's not a section of America where I don't have a First Amendment. Well, the same goes for my Second Amendment. So I've got the most votes on the board of directors of the mighty National Rifle Association for 27 years, I think 29 years, something like that, because people know I don't compromise. I got my right to have a gun from God, not from the government. The Second Amendment isn't even about me having the right to keep and bear arms. The Second Amendment is about nobody being allowed to infringe on it. Mm-hmm. So when I see Beto O'Rourke and Joe Biden going, "We're coming to get your guns, you can't have any," my instinct, I pick up my guitar every day. Gentlemen, talking about martial arts, I pick up my guitar. I have these magnificent Birdland guitars, Gibson Birdlands, and I got a wall of amps downstairs right next to my machine guns. So the inspiration is unlimited. And when I pick up the guitar, my soul erupts. I sing, whether it's American Campfire or even Wango Tango or Fred Bear or Stranglehold. But when it comes to witnessing these horrible oath-violating criminals in our government that right publicly will go, yeah, we're going to infringe on your Second Amendment. Oh, no, you're not. Here's the song that says, come and take it. Go ahead and try. Go ahead and die. It's a love song, basically. I sent a copy. And it's just a natural instinct. But I think, Stephen, what you identified, it really wouldn't even matter what the lyric content was, because what Greg Smith on bass guitar and Jason Hartless do on drums, that groove, that lick, that driving music that we learned from the Motown Funk Brothers and Sam and Dave and Wilson Pickett and James Brown and Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley and Little Richard, that vitality is in every lick, every song. It just happens to be a political statement that I'm a free man and I got my rights from God. Don't you dare get in my way of my freedom or my liberty. So, yeah, it's a powerful song, and boy, has it caught on. People love that song.
That's awesome. That's totally awesome. Well, listen, Ted, I know your time is running short, and I tell you, what a fantastic interview. We are just
we have to stop. Can we keep going?
I'd love to keep going, but I promised 45 minutes, so that's what we're going to do today. But listen, you are a patriot. We appreciate you so much coming on. Would you mind hanging on for just a minute when we stop? I'd like to get, if you don't mind, that you said that you had a recipe for groundhog, right?
Yep.
Hell yeah.
We're going to have a recipe page on our new website.
Yes, we are.
And I'd love to have a Ted Nugent recipe on our website. So,
absolutely.
I was proud to do that, man, because one thing about being clean and sober at the age of 73 is that my sacred temple has been fueled with the ultimate protein and nutrition from God's pantry. So, yeah, a woodchuck is like veal if you handle it right. And, of course, that's the trick with all wild game. All venison has to be handled right, because the term gamey is actually the ultimate attribute. It is turned into a negative because somebody got bile and guts and blood and poop on their meat. And so some people go, I had some meat, but it was gamey. No, it wasn't gamey. That was urine. So I do have Shemaine and I wrote a book called Kill It and Grill It a few years back, and people fell in love with it. And people are now finally realizing that Uncle Ted was the organic guy before it became hip. And venison is the ultimate diet in the world. So I'd be proud to do that. By the way, guys, thanks for having me on. When I speak, it might sound like Ted Nugent's got a lot of opinions, but I'm just sharing truth, logic, and common sense with you that I get no matter where I go on these not so mean streets in America. And I communicate with those Canadian truckers and the American truckers and working hard, playing hard American families that are rock solid in the asset column of this great nation. So when I speak, I'm too humble to think that my opinions might matter. So I instead share the truth, logic, and common sense that is supported with unlimited evidence, unlimited history, and the unlimited goodwill and decency of great, great American families. So that's what you guys do, and I salute you and thank you for that.
Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Ted Nugent. Trilogy Outdoors Podcast is a product of Trilogy Outdoors Media. All views and opinions of our hosts and guests are not necessarily those of our sponsors. Trilogy Outdoors is produced and edited by Trilogy Outdoors Media. Be sure to follow us on all the podcast platforms as well as our social media pages on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And also, don't forget our other brands, Southern English Radio Show and Walk 'Em All Outdoor Magazine. To find more information, visit TrilogyOutdoorsMedia.com. And remember, if it's anything dealing with fins, fur, and feathers, you're going to find it right here on Trilogy Outdoors.